Welcome to another episode of the Doctors Building Wealth podcast. This week, Kenji and I wanted to answer a question we get all the time, especially from our newer investors. And the question is, hey, I'm searching on Redfin and I can't find any properties at Cashflow. Why aren't there any properties at Cashflow? So this is a really common one that we hear in our course, Zero to Freedom. And what's going on is people now have a cash on cash calculator. And a cash on cash calculator is a really important tool for real estate investors. If you guys don't know how to use it, definitely you need to learn how to use it. And we'll put a link in the show notes for you guys to our cash on cash calculators. But basically, people are starting to use a cash on cash calculator. And they're looking online. They're often using Redfin or they're using Zillow. And they're looking at properties that are investment properties, maybe duplexes, fourplexes. And they're plugging in the numbers for the rents that are listed on the listings of what the properties are currently renting at. And they're putting in all the other variables like the interest rate and all the other expenses like insurance, property taxes, vacancy, maintenance, all those types of things into the cash and cash calculator. And they're getting low cash and cash returns, maybe 2% or 4%, or sometimes they're even getting negative cash and cash returns. And I have to say that is even more common that we hear about negative cash and cash returns. And they're wondering what's going on. And they're thinking that there aren't any deals in the market that they've chosen. And this is when we start to see people say, I have to switch markets. I have to choose a different market. So we wanted to make sure that we took some time to kind of explain what's going on and to explain how we take properties that are negative cash and cash return or low cash and cash return and how we see the potential to make them into higher cash on cash returns. So let's start out, Kenji, by kind of talking about when you're a newer investor doing all those cash and cash returns and you're not seeing any deals at work. What are you missing?
Well, there are a number of things that they're missing. And one of the most common scenarios is they're not seeing the deals that pop up onto the market and an investor comes in and locks up the property, gets it under contract. And so those properties go immediately pending, and they might have been listed on the market for maybe just a few hours before that listing is now pending. So when you do a search for sale properties, that pending property is not showing up anymore. So I think that's a really, really common thing, is that the really good deals disappear quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the deals that are often out there for longer periods of time are the deals that are not great deals. Now, another thing that they might be missing is there will be deals that are out there that the prices have been decreasing over time, but they're still not quite where they need to be to make the cash and cash work. But those are really motivated sellers. And if the person isn't looking at the price history and looking at what kind of changes are happening, they may look at the price and say, oh, it's 1.2 million. But what they don't see, it was 1.3 million just, 2 weeks or a month ago. And so they, at this point, could probably get it for 1.1 million or 1 million. And that would actually make their cash and cash look a lot better. And so they're not anticipating what could happen with the price and how they could actually change the price through negotiations to be able to get it to a cash and cash that would actually work.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I wanted to elaborate on that further by giving you an example. And so we had an investor, a student of ours, who went through our course. One of the things that he did was he actually focused on some properties that were out in the market for a long time. And what he found was that some properties sit on the market for a long time because people are not able to get financing for them. And so the solution for that is to figure out a way to get financing for it. If you can figure out how to get financing for it, then you can buy the property. And he figured out that what he needed to do was go out and find a specialized lender who would lend on that particular property. And he found great opportunities. So that's another thing that I think that some people will look at properties that have been sitting on the market for a long time and say, well, that's not a good deal. Or they don't even think about the fact that maybe, like as you said, you can negotiate that price to go down because the seller is more desperate or seller's more motivated to sell. If they're motivated to sell, then they're likely to accept a lower purchase price.
Now, the thing we haven't talked about yet is called hidden value. And that's when you can take a property and you can increase its value, increase its cash flow, increase its cash on cash return by seeing places that it could be making more money or it could have decreased expenses over what it's performing like right now. And so this is really one of the keys to being able to take a property that's negative cash and cash return or extremely low cash and cash return and turn it into a property that makes a lot more cash and cash return. And this is really the creativity and the seeing the potential of the property, and is so key to how we've been able to make so many deals work for us, is looking at the properties and not seeing what they are right now, but seeing what they can become.
Yeah, and I wanted to emphasize that term hidden value. I think the common term out there is value add. But what we teach and what we do is very different because it's hidden value. And what makes it different is that it's the types of things that people don't see. It's the types of things that are actually unusual or maybe unique to a particular market. And so, there are many value add opportunities that are common, things like, adding a bedroom or a bathroom. The types of ideas we're talking about include those, but they're going to be also some hidden ones that you really need to kind of dig into the property sometimes to find those opportunities. And that's one of the things that we found about our community. They're so creative, and they go out and they find these hidden opportunities that nobody else sees. And that's why we call it hidden values, because when you're looking at Redfin or Zillow and you're looking at hundreds of listings, when you're relatively new at this, you don't see those opportunities at first. They're hidden to you. That's why we call it hidden value.
And again, these can be simple, and these can also be a lot more nuanced. And a lot of the simple ones are things like people are taking in the rents that are currently the property's currently being rented at, and they're plugging it into the cash and cash calculator, and they're thinking this is how the property is going to perform. What they don't realize is, those are under market rents. And the day you take over that property, you can start increasing rents to be more market level rents. They don't see things like the landlord isn't billing back utilities, but they could totally bill back utilities. And just a couple $100s a month of billing back utilities can change the cash and cash calculations entirely. It can make a huge difference. Or they don't see that the property management costs are really, really high, and there are ways to reduce that. Or insurance is really high, and there are ways to reduce that. So there's a lot of ways to not only increase income, but reduce expenses. And what's so cool about reducing expenses is there's often no cost to reducing expenses. And if you can eliminate an expense like utilities or like landscaping or things like that, it can make such a difference in your cash and cash right away. And your return can go from a very low cash and cash to, even 8-9% right off the bat with just doing a couple changes like that where you're eliminating expenses.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention something else, and what maybe it's a problem with the terminology value add, is that a lot of people are thinking about value add to their property, right? They're thinking about, how can I improve this property? How can I change it? But one question they're not asking is, can I get a different tenant? Can I get a higher paying tenant, which has nothing to do with value add for the property? It has taking the same exact property and going out and finding a different tenant who will pay more. An example is a property that we had where it was a duplex, and we originally rented it to regular tenants, and we had a very good cash on cash return from it. But then we kept asking ourselves, how can we increase the cash on cash return even further? And that's when we thought about, maybe we can get a different tenant for it. And what we ended up doing was getting a tenant that it was called supported living, is providing housing for people with intellectual disabilities. And that allowed us to actually not only increase the rents, but also decrease several expense categories at the same time. And our cash on cash return jumped up from 10% to 40%. So that's just an example of how, value add had nothing to do with the property. It only had to do with the tenant.
Yeah. So I just really want to reemphasize to people that when you're a newer investor and you're using the cash on cash calculator and you're going in and you're looking at different markets and you're plugging in all the numbers, and if you're getting low cash on cash returns or negative cash on cash returns, it's not the time to get frustrated or to worry that you've chosen the wrong market. It's the time to say, okay, it's time to get creative. It's time to get resourceful. It's time to go out and learn about different ways to add value to my property, look for hidden value, to look for opportunities to increase income and decrease expenses. And when you gain that knowledge, which is part of what we do in Zero to Freedom, is teaching this kind of way of thinking and way of looking at properties, a way of looking at the potential that there is there that can increase the cash and cash return. Once you learn that skill set, then you naturally start to do it, and almost becomes a game. Honestly, it's really a lot of fun to be looking and saying, hey, there's a lot of square footage here. Where can I find a space to add another bedroom? Or there's an unfinished basement here, or there's a storage unit out back, or all these types of things, all these ideas that kind of you have in the back of your head because you've seen other people be able to do them. And now it's a game to be able to increase income and decrease expenses. And it just kind of taps into your creativity and you start to see patterns everywhere, and it's really, really fun. So as a new investor, do not get frustrated, do not get upset. It is a completely normal process. Once you have the skill set, you're going to start to see deals abound all around you, and you'll get access to those deals, because you've also learned how to build relationships. And so even other deals will come to you that aren't even on the MLS, and that's a whole nother podcast entirely. Okay, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Doctors Building Wealth podcast on how to find properties that have good cash and cash return and cash flow. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend, to subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. And we'll see you next time.